The war was over. American soldiers returned home to ticker-tape parades and the promise of a future built on victory. Factories that had churned out tanks and bombers retooled for refrigerators and automobiles. In living rooms across the nation, families gathered around radio sets, grateful that the shooting had stopped, that Hitler was dead, that the boys were finally coming home. But another war was already beginning. This one would not be fought on distant battlefields. It would be fought in hearing rooms and courthouses, in Hollywood studios and university lecture halls, in the quiet offices of government bureaucrats and the cramped apartments of school teachers. This war would turn neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and in some cases, brother against sister. It would be a war fought with lists and accusations, with loyalty oaths and blacklists, with the simple question that could destroy a life. Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Communist Party? The year is 1947. President Harry S. Truman sits in the Oval Office, staring at intelligence reports that speak of Soviet espionage, of atomic secrets stolen, of a world divided down the middle. The wartime alliance with the Soviet Union has collapsed. An iron curtain, as Winston Churchill called it, has descended across Europe. In China, communist forces under Mao Zedong are advancing. In Korea, tensions simmer. And in America, fear is taking root. On March 21, 1947, Truman signs Executive Order 9835, the Loyalty Order. Every federal employee must now be screened for disloyalty. Membership in certain organizations, those deemed totalitarian, fascist, communist, or subversive, becomes grounds for dismissal. The order speaks of protecting national security, of safeguarding democracy, but it opens a door that will never quite close. Truman doesn't fully grasp what he has unleashed. He believes he is being prudent, responding to legitimate threats with measured precaution. What he has actually done is create a template, a model that will metastasize through every level of American society. States adopt their own loyalty programs. Cities follow suit. Private industries institute their own screening processes. By 1958, an estimated 1 in every 5 American workers will be required to pass some form of loyalty review. The investigations begin quietly at first. Federal workers are called in one by one, asked questions about their associations, their beliefs, their reading habits. Did you attend this meeting? Did you donate to this cause? Do you know this person? The questions seem reasonable on the surface, bureaucratic even, but underneath runs a current of suspicion that will soon become a riptide. In February 1950, a junior senator from Wisconsin steps to a podium in Wheeling, West Virginia. His name is Joseph Raymond McCarthy. He is 41 years old, a former chicken farmer and Marine intelligence officer with a reputation for playing fast and loose with the truth. He has been in the Senate for 3 years and accomplished little. He is facing re-election in 2 years and needs an issue, something that will make headlines, something that will make people remember his name. He holds up a piece of paper. I have here in my hand a list of 205 cases of individuals who appear to be either card-carrying members or certainly loyal to the Communist Party, he says, his voice rising with theatrical indignation, who nevertheless are still working and shaping the policy in the State Department. The number will change in subsequent speeches, sometimes 57. Sometimes 81, sometimes 205 again. The list itself will never be produced. Years later, historians will conclude it was likely blank paper, a prop, theater. But in that moment, On that February night in West Virginia, Joseph McCarthy becomes a national sensation. The speech ignites something primal in the American psyche. The country has just emerged from a war that cost 400,000 American lives. The atomic bomb has made the unthinkable suddenly possible. The Soviets have detonated their own nuclear weapon. China has fallen to communism. American boys are about to start dying in Korea. And now this senator is saying that communists have infiltrated the highest levels of government. The press descends. McCarthy appears on the front page of every major newspaper. Letters pour into his office by the thousands. Some call him a hero, a patriot finally willing to speak the truth. Others call him a demagogue, a liar. But everyone is talking about him. McCarthy has found his issue, and America is about to discover what fear can do to a democracy. The machinery of suspicion begins to turn. The House Un-American Activities Committee, known by its chilling acronym WWII, had existed since 1938, but now it finds new purpose, new energy. Subpoenas fly, witnesses are called in, hearings are held in rooms packed with reporters and cameras. In October 1947, Hollywood comes under scrutiny. The movie industry has long been a target of conservative suspicion, too liberal, too Jewish, too sympathetic to leftist causes. WWII summons 42 people from the film industry to testify. Some come willingly: Walt Disney, Gary Cooper, Ronald Reagan, offering testimony about communist influence in the entertainment world.
Others refuse to cooperate. 10 screenwriters and directors, men who would become known as the Hollywood 10, invoke their First Amendment rights and refuse to answer questions about their political affiliations. It is a principled stand. It is also professional suicide. Dalton Trumbo, one of the highest-paid screenwriters in Hollywood, sits before the committee and challenges its very legitimacy. "This is the beginning of an American concentration camp," he says. For this, he is charged with contempt of Congress. He is sentenced to a year in federal prison. He is blacklisted by every major studio in Hollywood. For the next decade, Trumbo will write under pseudonyms, selling scripts on the black market, hiding his talent behind false names. He will win 2 Academy Awards during this period, for The Brave One and Roman Holiday, neither of which he can claim. His children will learn to lie about what their father does for a living. This is what fear looks like. Lee Grant makes her film debut in Detective Story in 1951. She is 23 years old and earns an Oscar nomination for her very first role. Her career should be skyrocketing. Instead, she makes the mistake of speaking at a funeral. The deceased is J. Edward Bromberg, an actor who suffered a fatal heart attack shortly after being accused of communist sympathies. At his funeral, Grant speaks about how the investigation contributed to his death. Her remarks are seemingly benign, a young woman mourning a colleague. They destroy her career. She is called before HUAC and asked to name her own husband as a communist. She refuses. She invokes the Fifth Amendment. For the next 12 years, she is effectively banned from film and television. 12 years. From age 23 to 35. The prime of any actor's career, stolen. When she finally returns to acting in the 1960s, she will go on to win an Oscar. But those 12 years are gone forever. Across the country, similar stories multiply. Teachers stand before review boards, trying to defend themselves against accusations they barely understand. Julius Hlavaty, chair of the mathematics department at Bronx High School of Science, widely considered the best math teacher in America, is called before McCarthy's committee in 1953. He refuses to discuss his brief involvement with left-wing politics in the 1930s, activities that were perfectly legal at the time. He is fired, blacklisted. A man who dedicated his life to educating young minds is suddenly unemployable, his name synonymous with disloyalty. At the University of California, 31 faculty members are fired for refusing to sign a loyalty oath that requires them to swear they do not advocate the overthrow of the government. Some are refugee scholars who fled Nazi Germany, who came to America seeking freedom, only to find themselves once again being asked to pledge ideological purity. Erik Erikson, the psychologist who will later become world famous for his theories of human development, resigns in protest. He writes, "I am a psychoanalyst, and I have to deal daily with the consequences in human lives of the absence of ideological freedom." The oath achieves nothing in terms of security. It reveals no spies, uncovers no conspiracies, but it succeeds in creating exactly what it claims to prevent: an atmosphere of fear and suspicion that corrodes the very freedoms it purports to protect. And then there are Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. On a summer morning in 1950, FBI agents arrive at a modest apartment in New York City. Julius Rosenberg, an electrical engineer and former Army Signal Corps employee, is arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit espionage. 2 months later, his wife, Ethel, is also arrested. The charge: passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The evidence against them comes primarily from Ethel's younger brother, David Greenglass, who worked as a machinist at Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project. Greenglass confesses to stealing secrets and claims that Julius recruited him, that Ethel typed up his notes. In exchange for his testimony, Greenglass receives 15 years in prison and serves less than 10 years. His wife, Ruth, who also participated, is never even indicted. Years later, Greenglass will admit he lied. He will say he testified falsely against his sister to protect his own wife, that Ethel probably wasn't involved at all. But by then, it will be far too late. The trial begins in March 1951. Judge Irving Kaufman presides, a staunch anti-communist who has already demonstrated his willingness to hand down maximum sentences to anyone connected with communist activities. Throughout the proceedings, he makes little attempt to appear impartial. The evidence is thin. There are no photographs, no documents in Ethel's handwriting, no physical proof that she did anything beyond being Julius's wife. The government's case rests almost entirely on the testimony of her brother and sister-in-law. But this is 1951. The Korean War is raging. American soldiers are dying fighting communist forces in Asia. The public wants blood. On April 5th, Judge Kaufman sentences both Julius and Ethel Rosenberg to death. In his sentencing statement, he says, "I consider your crime worse than murder. Plain, deliberate, contemplated murder is dreadful enough in itself, but your conduct in putting into the hands of the Russians the A-bomb has already caused the communist aggression in Korea, with the resultant casualties exceeding 50,000, and who knows but that millions more of innocent people may pay the price of your treason." For 2 years, the Rosenbergs fight for their lives.
Appeals fail. The Supreme Court refuses to review the case 7 times. President Truman denies clemency. President Eisenhower, who takes office in 1953, also refuses to intervene. The Rosenbergs, he states, may have condemned to death tens of millions of innocent people all over the world. Around the world, protests erupt. Pope Pius XII appeals for mercy. Albert Einstein writes letters urging commutation of the sentence. In France, in Britain, in Latin America, people march and rally and plead for the United States to spare these 2 lives. The pleas are ignored. On the morning of June 19, 1953, the Rosenbergs write a final letter to their 2 sons, Michael and Robert, ages 10 and 6. "We were innocent," they write, "and could not wrong our conscience." The execution is scheduled for 11 p.m., but this presents a problem. It would fall during the Jewish Sabbath. The defense attorneys argue that executing them on the Sabbath would violate their religious heritage. Judge Kaufman responds by moving the execution earlier, to 8 p.m. before sunset, before the Sabbath officially begins. Julius Rosenberg is taken to the electric chair first. The current is applied. He dies. Ethel follows, but her execution does not go smoothly. The first shock fails to kill her. A second application is required, and then a third. Smoke rises from her head. The smell of burning flesh fills the execution chamber. Witnesses report that it takes several minutes for her to die. Ethel Rosenberg becomes the first woman executed by the United States government since Mary Surratt was hanged in 1865 for alleged involvement in Abraham Lincoln's assassination. She leaves behind 2 young sons who will spend the rest of their lives fighting to clear her name. Whether the Rosenbergs were guilty of espionage remains debated to this day. Soviet documents released after the Cold War suggest Julius was indeed a spy, though the information he passed was likely of minimal value. Ethel appears to have known about her husband's activities, but probably did not actively participate. What is not debatable is this: they were executed in a climate of hysteria, based on testimony from a witness who later admitted he lied, for a crime that normally carries a prison sentence, not death. They died because America was afraid. By 1953, Joseph McCarthy has reached the height of his power. The Republicans have won control of Congress in 1952. McCarthy becomes chairman of the Senate Committee on Government Operations and its permanent subcommittee on investigations. From this position, he launches investigation after investigation, calling hundreds of witnesses in both public and closed sessions. His tactics are brutal and effective. He uses hearsay and innuendo. He destroys reputations with single accusations. He interrupts witnesses mid-sentence, bellowing, "Point of order, point of order." He waives documents he claims contain damning evidence, but never actually produces. He smears decorated war heroes and respected civil servants with equal abandon. The press cannot get enough of it. Television, still a new medium, broadcasts his hearings live. Millions of Americans watch, riveted, as McCarthy interrogates witnesses, accuses, condemns. At first, even President Eisenhower tries to ignore him, hoping McCarthy will simply exhaust himself. Then Eisenhower tries to outdo him in anti-communist zeal. Then he tries to seduce him with promises of new legislation to root out communism. Nothing works. McCarthy is beyond control, beyond reason. His accusations grow wilder, his targets more varied. Librarians, clergy, scientists, United Nations employees, anyone who has ever attended a meeting, signed a petition, donated to a cause that might have had communist connections, all are potential targets. And then, in early 1954, McCarthy makes a fatal mistake. He turns his investigative powers on the United States Army. The proximate cause is trivial. G. David Schein, a former McCarthy aide and close friend of McCarthy's chief counsel Roy Cohn, has been drafted. Cohn attempts to use his influence to get Schein special treatment, plum assignments, easy duty, frequent leaves. When the Army refuses to fully cooperate, McCarthy accuses them of being soft on communism. The Army responds by releasing a detailed chronology of every instance in which Cohn attempted to intervene on Schein's behalf. The document paints a picture of improper influence, of threats and intimidation. 2 days before the Army releases its report, CBS airs a special episode of See It Now. Journalist Edward R. Murrow, one of the most trusted voices in American media, devotes the entire program to exposing McCarthy's tactics. Using the senator's own words, his own footage, Murrow meticulously demonstrates McCarthy's pattern of bullying, lying, and character assassination. "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty," Murrow tells millions of viewers. "We must remember always that accusation is not proof, and that conviction depends on evidence and due process of law." The tide begins to turn.
In March 1954, the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations decides to hold public hearings to investigate the charges and countercharges between McCarthy and the Army. Since McCarthy is one of the parties involved, he is forced to step down as chairman. Senator Carl Mundt takes his place. The hearings begin on April 22, 1954. The major television networks, ABC, NBC, and Dumont, agreed to broadcast them live, gavel to gavel. Over the next 36 days, an estimated 80 million Americans will watch at least part of the proceedings. The Army hires a lawyer to represent its interests. His name is Joseph Welch, a soft-spoken attorney from Boston with an incisive wit and a grandfatherly demeanor. He is 63 years old, near retirement, and seems almost too mild-mannered for the task ahead. McCarthy quickly learns otherwise. Day after day, Welch methodically dismantles McCarthy's arguments. He exposes inconsistencies in testimony. He punctures grandstanding with dry humor. He remains unfailingly polite while making McCarthy look increasingly foolish and desperate. By June, McCarthy is visibly unraveling. His interruptions become more frequent, his attacks more personal, his behavior more erratic. On June 9, 1954, day 30 of the hearings, the confrontation finally erupts. Welch is questioning Roy Cohn, McCarthy's chief counsel, about a supposed list of 130 communists or subversives in defense plans. Welch challenges Cohn to provide this list to the FBI before sundown. His tone is gently mocking, and it infuriates McCarthy. The senator interrupts. "If Welch is so concerned about communists," McCarthy says, "perhaps he should look closer to home. Perhaps he should investigate Fred Fisher, a young lawyer in Welch's own Boston law firm." Fisher, McCarthy reveals, once belonged to the National Lawyers Guild, an organization that Attorney General Herbert Brownell has called the legal bulwark of the Communist Party. The room goes silent. Welch had known about Fisher's brief membership in the Guild. He had discussed it with Fisher weeks earlier, and they had agreed Fisher should return to Boston rather than participate in the hearings. The issue had been settled quietly, privately. McCarthy had even agreed not to mention it. Now McCarthy has broken that agreement, attacking a young man on national television, attempting to destroy his reputation before he's even begun his career. Welch's face drains of color. For a moment, he seems unable to speak. Then, slowly, with a tremor in his voice, he says, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness." McCarthy tries to continue his attack. Welch interrupts him. "Senator, may we not drop this? We know he belonged to the Lawyers Guild. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough." He pauses. Then, looking directly at McCarthy, he asks the question that will echo through history. "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?" The room erupts in applause. Spectators, reporters, and even some committee members begin clapping. On television sets across America, viewers watch as McCarthy sits stunned into silence. For once, the bully has no response. Welch's performance, and that's what it is, a masterful piece of theater,
turns public opinion overnight. McCarthy, exposed on national television as a reckless character assassin, sees his support evaporate. His approval rating, which stood at 50% in January 1954, plummets to 34% by the end of June. The hearings conclude on June 17th. The committee's final report spreads blame around, but ultimately finds that McCarthy himself engaged in no improper conduct, though Roy Cohn did. It hardly matters. The damage to McCarthy is irreparable. In December 1954, the Senate votes 67-22 to censure Joseph McCarthy for conduct that tends to bring the Senate into dishonor and disrepute. It is a humiliating rebuke. McCarthy loses his committee chairmanship when Democrats retake the Senate in 1955. He fades from the headlines. He starts drinking heavily. On May 2, 1957, at the age of 48, Joseph McCarthy dies of acute hepatitis, his liver destroyed by alcoholism. The era that bears his name is officially over, but the damage lingers. Families remain divided. Careers stay destroyed. Reputations are never fully restored. The Blacklist will continue, unofficially, until 1960, when director Otto Preminger and actor Kirk Douglas publicly announced that Dalton Trumbo will receive screenwriting credit for Exodus and Spartacus.
Lee Grant won't appear in another major film until 1963. When she finally returns, she will be 38 years old, her youth gone, 12 years stolen. Julius Hlavati, the brilliant math teacher, will never teach again. He will die in obscurity, his contributions to education forgotten. Erik Erikson and other refugee scholars who refused to sign loyalty oaths carry with them a bitter irony. They fled totalitarianism in Europe only to watch their adopted country embrace its tactics. And Michael and Robert Rosenberg grow up as the orphaned children of executed spies, living under assumed names, their childhoods haunted by their parents' deaths. In 2015, they will petition President Obama to posthumously exonerate their mother. The petition will be denied. By 1958, when the worst of the Red Scare has passed, historians begin tallying the cost. More than 2,700 federal employees dismissed, 12,000 resigned under pressure, 69 university professors fired nationwide for political reasons. Hundreds of teachers lost their jobs. Thousands more censored themselves, afraid to discuss controversial topics in their classrooms. An entire generation of children educated in an atmosphere of fear. And for what? Years later, when Soviet archives opened after the Cold War, evidence emerged that yes, there had been Soviet espionage in America during the 1940s. Perhaps as many as 600 Americans worked for Soviet intelligence at various times. Some of those accused by McCarthy and others were indeed spies, but the vast majority were not. Most were simply people who had held unpopular opinions, attended the wrong meetings, known the wrong people. They were victims not of their own guilt, but of collective fear. The question America never adequately answered: what threatens democracy more, a handful of spies or the systematic suppression of free thought? In defending itself against external enemies, America very nearly became what it claimed to oppose. It embraced lists and loyalty oaths. It encouraged informants and suspicion. It punished dissent and difference. It made people afraid to speak, afraid to question, afraid to be different. Fear did what no enemy could. It made Americans doubt the very foundations of their freedom. Today, we use McCarthy's name as shorthand for political witch hunts. We speak of McCarthyism when politicians make unfounded accusations, when people are condemned without evidence, when ideology trumps justice. But perhaps we should remember it as something else.
Perhaps we should remember it as a cautionary tale about what happens when fear overcomes reason, when suspicion replaces trust, when the desire for security overwhelms the commitment to freedom. On that June evening in 1953, as Julius and Ethel Rosenberg walked to the electric chair, as Dalton Trumbo wrote scripts under false names in borrowed offices, as Julius Hlavati tried to explain to his students why their teacher had been fired, as Lee Grant wondered if she would ever work again, America was supposed to be the beacon of freedom, the land where people could think what they wanted, say what they believed, associate with whom they chose, the country that had just defeated fascism and was now locked in struggle against totalitarianism. Instead, for a brief but terrible period, America became something else, a place where a list could destroy a life, where an accusation carried more weight than evidence, where fear mattered more than facts. The McCarthy era ended, the blacklists dissolved, the loyalty oaths were eventually struck down, but something intangible was lost, a certain innocence, a belief that it couldn't happen here, that Americans would always choose freedom over fear. It did happen here, and the question that still echoes across the decades, that should haunt us still: have you no sense of decency? At long last, have you left no sense of decency? If this story moved you, if it made you remember the names that fear tried to erase, the careers it destroyed, the families it shattered, the freedoms it threatened, then let their memory serve as a warning. Let it remind you that democracy is fragile, that freedom requires constant vigilance, and that the most dangerous threats often come not from without, but from within. Subscribe and help us keep their stories alive, because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.